Mr. Pharmacist. The Pharmacy is a music talk show playing heavy soul, raw funk, 60s psych, girl grooves, krautrock, French yeah-yeah, Hammond organ rituals, post-punk transmissions, and ghosts on the Highway Testimonials. Features interviews with the music makers of our time. This week, we have historian of the legendary Source family, Isis Aquarian, here with us in conversation. If you don't know about the Source family, they were one of the first young spiritualist groups to combine the teachings of the yogis and gurus of the East, the Persian and counterculture of the late 60s, early 70s Los Angeles, sex, drugs, and rock and roll scene. The Source, led by Jim Baker, aka Father Yod, also operated the Source restaurant on the Sunset Strip, notably one of the country's first organic food restaurants, catering to the LA art, film, and music worlds. Known patrons were John Lennon and Yoko Ono, among others. And the iconic Woody Allen film, Annie Hall, was partially shot there. The Source became a fixture on the LA rock and roll and spiritual scene, which inspired goodness and light from some, as well as skepticism from others who viewed the Source as a hippie cult, shrouded in the mysteries of Eastern mysticism and the murderous cloud of fear and confusion. In the wake of the Manson family Tate LaBianca tragedy, Drag City Records released a film in 2012 documenting the Source family, which, critically acclaimed and highly recommended, is essential viewing. So on today's show, Source family historian Isis Aquarian joins us to go a bit further back into the Source family and into the exciting and fertile early 1970s LA counterculture world. The show will feature music from Source family band Yahoah 13, as well as Isis's personal documentation of Father Yod's unheard and often fascinating morning meditation tapes, unearthed after 40 plus years. Let's talk about what we heard. Started off with Funkadelic from the 1971 LP Maggot Brain, the Source family member and historian Isis Aquarian, here in the Pharmacy. I think the good place to start would be for those people who don't know about it or have not seen the film, if you could briefly describe what the Source family was.
The Source family was a time that came into its own in the early 70s. I describe it like it was a portal that opened and a lot of us stepped through it in the 60s. Like, we all knew there was something happening, something different, and we were being guided and led. Many people just walked. They walked out of their homes, they walked out of their jobs, they walked away. Before that we had the Beatniks and the Bohemians that kind of did the same thing in their own way. But when this movement started, it gathered with other like-minded movements that were happening. This was the Eastern influence of the gurus that came over. And the whole spiritual explosion started, something that we have not had as a mass media for those in the free world. The Source family was born out of that fertile ground in Los Angeles, where everything was possible, everything was open and new. And Jim Baker was a legend in his time to begin with. He was called a food guru because of his other two famous restaurants on Sunset Strip. So when he started the Source with his wife at the time, Dora, and created the Source logo to represent this new movement, he was in his 40s, but he wanted to know what was going on. He knew something was happening and changing. And most people at that time had been investigating all known spiritual aspects. And people had started investigating all of that, including people that came into the family. Some of them had been into the yogis, some of them had tried other communes. So when The source was set up, it was set up as an organic, vegetarian, very high-class restaurant, which frequented the rich and the famous and all the Hollywood elite, the rock stars, the movie stars. So it kind of had a little different thing happening with it, more than just a hippie hangout. So everybody started being gravitated towards it. It wasn't like going to an ashram or being part of the yogis. It was more of a new age energy. It's what the West was supposed to be about, the merging of the East and the West. It was a little higher vibration than what the yogis were presenting. So that appealed to a lot of us on an evolutionary level. And when we found Father and we stepped into the source, speaking for myself, it was just a no-brainer. It was like a quickening. It was a sort of a rapture. You just know something's happening and this is what you should be doing and where you should be going. It's like you're being guided on your journey and your path, and that's what meditation does. It brings you in to that point of origin, because we are spirit in a physical body, so it connects you inside to that spiritual thread that's always been you from the beginning of time. I knew I was supposed to be there. I knew that was my next step. And I just left everything and came to LA. I was dating, a young Rob Reiner at the time. And just slid right back in again to a very nice LA crowd. And
like Annie Hall.
They filmed on the Source patio. Then I ended up meeting one of the most famous rock and roll photographers of that time, Ron Raffaele, and moved into his studio and started working with him, and we became engaged. So here I was hanging out with the Rolling Stones as they would come over to shoot, and all the rock stars. It was just like, once again, not missing out on anything. During that time, I had gone to the Old World restaurant, which was very famous, and that was owned by Jim Baker and his wife Dora, and I became friends with Dora. So I knew Jim Baker. I knew Jim Baker before the Source. And when I was with Ron Raffaele, we were looking for Jesus-type people to shoot for a Jesus Christ Superstar poster or something. And I had never been to the Source, and I hadn't seen Jim in a little while, and I heard he had opened it. And they were wearing robes and had long hair, and it was the early part of the Source. So I just thought, well, I'll go down and get some models. And I just went down one day, and he came out on the patio, and, he looked just like Moses. And I had a quickening. It was a rapture. It was like my frequency changed.
They were holy men, but they were ignorant holy men.
I never was the same again. It was like I never went back. I was like uncoded. I was imprinted to his soul.
That's why the prophet must return, age to age to age to age to age.
I got a complete transmission. And so that's what happened to me, and I just went, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. I was waiting for that soul to reach where he was right then and there, his early father, and on his spiritual path. He'd recently met the Yogi Balajan, and his Kundalini went up, he got illumined. So he was like really serious about his evolutionary process, his destiny for this lifetime. And I knew that was where I was, supposed to enter. So, I did. Stage left, I entered that play and took my part. And that was that. I went back to Ron and I said, I wanted him to come with me. I didn't want to leave him. And he just completely freaked out. And so that didn't work. And so, that was it. I never went back. And Father told me, he very quickly told me what was happening with us. He said, we've made these commitments to each other before this lifetime. And he says, we've always worked like this with each other. We've always done the work. And so that's just been a commitment that I never deviated from. And it's never been hard. It's always been very, very easy. And I still hold that thread, even, 40 some years later.
With my conversation with the Source families, I Isis Aquarium, here in the pharmacy. The mainstream society, okay, at this time, they were becoming aware of like culture and music and spirituality, but there was a lot of fear.
The Manson family, when it hit, it destroyed a lot of spiritual evolutionary process that could have happened. It definitely was like the dark forces came in and just like won a victory for a long time on that one. Everybody was scared. Everybody was buying guns. Everybody was totally freaked out. A lot of Jim Baker's friends, like Steve Allen, Warren Beatty, all these people he'd been friends with for a very long time because of his other restaurants. And as Jim Baker started, not coming around,
right,
started questioning, well, he's gone off the deep end. He's no longer Jim Baker. He's living with 150 people in one house. He's got 14 women. So they did. A lot of them pulled back. Some of them didn't, Some of them just let him go in kindness, but he was no longer Jim Baker, so they didn't really, that was the end of their relationship. Because they had a friendship with Jim Baker, and he was no longer Jim Baker.
Mm-hmm. For those who don't know, there's a pretty extensive film made on the Source family. But as the historian, can you tell us about some of the mystical, spiritual, or supernatural happenings that weren't mentioned in the film? And if they were, some of the more intense or spiritual happenings before your eyes?
Well, we became a mystery school teaching. That was our teachings, and so everything was mystical. Now, we remembered past lifetimes, Father led us through things good and bad. And to us, miracles happened all the time, and we just saw it as a way of life. But, there's certain things that happen, like, the birth of the first child was born with a cord 3 times and was dead. Father pulled out a name that he'd already named the baby, Solomon, and he just made a plea to God, and he said, I will speak nothing but the word of God if you let this child live, and he breathed into his mouth, and the child came back to life. That was a miracle for anybody that was there. There are other things that happened. We were putting up a flagpole, and the wind wasn't out, and the flag wouldn't fly, and he put up his hand and moved it, and the flag flew, and wherever he moved his hand, the flag went. And then he just stopped and laughed. And he said, I'm not going to be doing this. He said, this isn't the time for showmanship or miracles or dogma. But he did every once in a while, stuff like that would happen. I think the greatest miracle that he wanted for us was how we could change the cells in our body, how we could change the morphine of our being into our next evolutionary process to a spiritual man. That was the miracle he wanted everybody to see.
The Source family. A little bit later, the film talks about Father getting into things like the Templars, the Atlanteans, the Druids, and stuff like ceremonial magic.
Jupiter! Solar power of the universe! Solar plexus of Tauti!
We experienced all of it. These are all things that we had been involved in, lived in one way or the other, been part of. It was like bringing up your memory bank to now so that you could be a complete whole being and remember it and move on from it. That's high magic. It's magic that King David used, Solomon used with his 700 wives. It's stuff people don't remember or know about. And there's a reason things are called secrets or the hidden mysteries or the mystery school. I'll tell you one thing, Father and the family, anything that we did, we never meant any hurt or harm. Ceremonial magic always contains the sexual magic. So sexual magic is a very powerful thing. It's a very real thing. I wouldn't necessarily say it's something that should be done for magic. I would say it's something that should be done for balancing and for doing the work in the light.
I know in the movie they talk about seeing vampires going down the staircase.
Well, we were living at our first communal home was called the Mother House. It was the Chandler Mansion, the people that own the LA Times. Now, if you know anything about the Chandler family in the early days, they brought Chinese slaves in, and they weren't really very nice people. Mr. Chandler was not a nice person. Father could not move into that house. He tried to move into that house, and he said he just had nightmares of what Otis Chandler had done. You know, the harm he had done people and his bad intentions, and he just saw Chinese laborers being, you know, massacred, trying to put in railroads or something. And so it held the residue, it held the vibration. So that negativity and that vibration apparently attracted the dark forces. When the family started seeing these things appear, Father just had to go in and clear the whole house, and then it was fine. Then we got into the magic of the elementals, the fairies, the gnomes, the water elementals. I mean, there's many people that will swear to you that they were in their room. You know, the simple tantric practices were okay and understood, but then when it started getting into the tantric practices with the ceremonial magic side of it, it scared some, because I don't think some thought that they were strong enough to go through it and be okay. It's like going through a death experience. That's what the King's Chamber is about. This was right for Jim Baker. It was Father's show.
The sun from which he came, the Atlantean.
It was his journey. He made that pretty clear to us. He said, I'm going on a journey. I don't know where it's going to take me, but if you want to come along,
you can become part of that great being's brain.
Come along. And we did. So it became our journey in a way. But it was his journey, and when he left the body and the family dispersed, then it became our journey. We're all now on our own journey. And the Source family was something that happened 40 years ago. We hold it sacred within that time frame. We hold each other sacred in that time frame. But in the now, it's like we're all different people.
This is a very tight family, man. You see me alone out there? You see how I absolutely need you, and how you absolutely need me, and what a great marriage it is?
The Source family's Isis Aquarian discusses having to leave Mother House and being followed by the CIA and FBI in their quest for spiritual freedom. Here in the Focus. You all had to leave that home, and I think it was 73 or something like that.
The owner was actually the son, the heir of the LA Times, Otis Chandler's son. He was getting complaints from the neighbors because of the Manson thing that had happened. And here's 200 people running around in long robes. Right. They didn't know what we were up to. There was chanting 4 o'clock in the morning that bothered some people. So, when our lease was up, they asked us to move, and we did, and that was fine. And then we just moved up to Nichols Canyon into another mansion, which was more private and secluded, and it was actually better for us. It was definitely smaller, and so what we did was, the mother house had 3 stories. It was must have had 20 bedrooms and 15 bathrooms. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Right.
But the father house was a very large mansion, and it worked very well for us, and it had big, long rooms and hallways. We just got very creative. We put up what they called cubby holes or beehives, and everybody had their own space to sleep. And they're the same thing that they've done in Japan now at the airport. They're just like little cubby holes you can go and sleep in or rest. I don't know if you've heard of that. A lot of people opted to build platforms on the hillside, and they would take their bedding and go out there and sleep under the stars. It got to a point where we just really got tired of being hassled by the building inspector, child welfare, because we were homeschooling, we were home birthing. That was illegal.
Yeah.
You could not do that. We had 52 births at home. We were homeschooling our kids, and it just totally freaked everybody out. And the FBI, CIA, we could look up on the hillside, and they'd have people, we could see them. And Father, at one time, sent a couple of sons up saying, we know you guys are here, come on down and have a cup of coffee. So what we did was, we wanted out. We wanted to go somewhere where we would have our own land, be left alone, be private, grow our own food, whatever, have our kids and live into old age until the golden age came and we were supposed to be doing what we were supposed to be doing. And a lot of people have that, you know, in their minds. The Jim Jones and all of that, they all started going to South America and trying to find places just to be left alone because you could not in America. We sold the stores and we left and went to Hawaii. We went to Kauai.
I'm curious about, just to touch on briefly, about the music.
Father said, always stay in the beat of the times. And in fact, it was the music, I think it was the Moody Blues that got Jim Baker into smoking marijuana and wanting to know what was going on with the hippies. It was the music. The music was the chariot that we rode into the ethers on. And the family created their music, spontaneous and a spiritual channeling. They basically just would let it rip, and it holds a frequency, and it holds a message, and it holds a residue that's very empowering. The Source family had incredible musicians. We had women singers. We had, Sky Saxon and the Seeds came in. It wasn't just the three guys that were known as Jehovah 13 with Father. We had some very accomplished musicians. There was a time when Father stopped singing. He handed it over to actually Sky to be the leader of the band, and they formed Fire, Water, Air. And I don't know if any of that recording has survived. And then there was just different groupings and jammings. Lovely was Andre Previn's daughter. She formed one of the family bands called Breath.
How was Sky Saxon back then?
Sky Saxon was always very beloved by everybody. He was a character. He loved dogs. He always tried to bring dogs into the family, but we said no pets. And he would say the dog backwards is God.
Right.
But he was a character, but he never had any hurt or harm ever intended in anything he said or did. He was like the kindest person I ever knew.
Right.
And he was just amazing. But the thing is he came in and out of the family, but with Father's blessing. Father said he's just got too much to do out there with his music. He needs to be a musician and be out there doing his work. But he would always come back and come home. We were pretty much in touch until he died, until he passed over.
Right, yeah.
I've always loved him a lot. Everybody does.
In the Father House, they talk about how there was this great studio that after morning meditation, y'all would go in there and just start recording, and recorded over 60 albums or...
So I think, it was 60-some albums that were recorded because everything we played was spontaneous and it got recorded. I think only maybe 10 or 11 albums got pressed. I never really felt like the music was my responsibility because the musicians were taking care of it. My responsibility was, as a historian, we got documented with photos. I started taking morning class, so I've got like 500
that's
class
amazing.
tapes that are being remastered. So the music was something that we all loved. Father loved it. He had so much fun. And we do have some of it left. Sky Saxon, Arlick was in the family. Sky Saxon are the Seeds. And the amazing thing is, because of the cassette tapes, I'm finding that I have a lot of the lost music on the tapes because I was either in the band room or during morning meditation, Father wanted to hear the latest jam from the day before, so he would play it. So we're able to save a lot of the music from that time this way. And they are being remastered and re-released on Drag City Records.
You're pushing too hard, or pushing on me. You're pushing too hard at what you want me to be. You're pushing too hard about the things you say.
You with the Sources, Isis Aquarium, here in the forest.
You ask why people in the now, why is it relevant to them now? These young kids, and I've been meeting with so many of them over the years, they were born of the consciousness of that time frame. They're the seed of that time frame born through their parents. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure, of course, yeah.
So their parents had that consciousness that was imprinted into them, and a lot of them are people from that time frame, just reincarnated, and a lot of them know that. You know, there's a whole thing with wanting to be hippies and flower children again. They already know that.
Right.
But they have to do it their way now. They're going to have to take it for the now and do their thing with it, just as we did back then. We're like the old guard. We're the old guard. We're still here and standing. But they're the new guard. The legacy's been saved and secured. It's going to long outlive all of us. It's already long outlived him. He can work in the cosmic realms with it. It's a continuing program. My thread with him never stopped. It was never broken, because until the legacy got saved, my commitment to him and work wasn't really done. So I have lived for 40 years as if, you know, he's still here. I remained his woman. I became what they called an Aquarian nun because I became celibate. You know, nothing changed for me just because he left the body. Nothing changed for me just because the family dispersed. I was not finished with my commitments or path. And it was not a hard thing to do. It was the same thing that happened when I stepped onto the Source patio and came before him, and that imprint, that quickening, that thing that happened in an instant that changed everything, where you don't look back. There's a lot still coming up. I'm not anywhere near done with projects and what I want to do. I'm still doing events. There's still things happening because of the film. Still doing interviews. I'm going to do a coffee table book of our photos from family time. Incredible, beautiful, spiritual photos that are amazing. And even though I started out as a family photographer, there were actually probably 4 other family photographers that I handed the camera off to, because I became a family administrator and kind of fathers. I worked with right under him and started taking, so I just couldn't do everything.
Right.
So there's other people that photographed, and I mean, there's just there's things that I can't talk about.
Sure, of course.
There's something like really, really good that if it comes through, it could be amazing. So it's just, you know, and I know other people in the family are doing things. You know, there's projects other people are starting to do now. So, you know, as far as I go, I'm doing certain things. As far as the Source family goes, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be done.
Turn it along with me. Why not? You're here.
Let the rainwater sprouts the subconscious seeds within the earth part of you, making the Akashic records visible to you. You must catch it while it's virgin before it hits the earth and penetrates.
That's the idea. Let it all out, then take it all back. But take it all back with consciousness. Desire, man. Desire's a trick. That's the trick. That'll bring old St. Nick. Here it comes. See him there. All those goodies on his back. And he ain't got no prayer. He just wants to get to you. Energy. Greatest gift of all. You'll soon see. That's it. Give it with the beat. Come on. We're gonna get it back. That's why you've been scared. Give it.
Welcome back. Let's talk about what we heard. We started off with Right Place, Wrong Time with Dr. John from the In the Right Place LP from 1973. Following that, I Get Lifted. Lovely guest Isis Aquarian of the Source family for being here in conversation with us. For more essential viewing, watch the Source family documentary now streaming on Amazon. Check the Source archives, www.ahoa.org, and Isis's book, The Source, the untold story of Father Yod, Yahweh 13, and the Source family. Available on Amazon. To hear more of The Pharmacy, go to DangerousMinds.net, Magic Monster Radio, and Mixcloud.com/Mr. Pharmacist. Stay tuned for our collaboration with Austin Psychfest this year. I'm also looking to syndicate The Pharmacy in other countries. Drop me a line at Facebook.com/Mr.Pharmacist. Thank you for tuning in. I am Mr. Pharmacist. Tune in next time for the perfect prescription that is the Pharmacist.
Certainly a far out group. You know me. You know I am not after followers. You know what I am after. There's a miracle, Fuzzy. He's heavy, see? He knows a lot, man.
This is Isis Aquarian with Father Yod and the Source on The Pharmacy with Gregg, foreman.
Mr.